Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ravi Hulasi. My pronouns are he and him. For those who can't see me very clearly, I'm a cis male of Indo-Caribbean heritage. I am head of strategic solutions at a company called Tamr. Tamr performs entity resolution using AI to build golden records. I've had the pleasure of presenting at Big Data London 2 years ago to talk about data mesh. So if you're looking to hear about data mesh, you may think you're in the wrong theatre, but rest assured, between myself and my friend Markus, we've got you covered. Markus.
Hi, my name is Markus Buhmann. My pronouns are he and him. For those who can't see very well, I'm a tall, cis, middle-aged European male wearing a Thoughtworks t-shirt and grey trousers. This is my first time speaking at Big Data London, and I'm very pleased to be sharing a stage with my good friend Ravi Hulasi. I'm a data multipart, we'll crack on from there, I suppose.
Yeah, sounds good. So here we're talking about how to get your data ready for AI, and really we see two main opportunities. Of course, we'll talk a little bit about why you need to manage your data going into your AI models and what getting that ready looks like. But equally so, we also wanted to emphasize the fact that you can use AI to help you. And that's a real force multiplier. We'll explain a little bit more about how AI can help you get there and give you a case study along the way. But before we do so, just a quick question, just for a little bit of fun. How are these three items linked? We have the father of the atomic bomb, Robert Oppenheimer. We have generative AI. And we have salvage divers in the South China Sea. So any thoughts, theories, guesses on how these three are located?
Anyone? No? Cool. So this is really, really interesting and really, really important for everyone's focus on generative AI and large language models, and this will feed into our conversation as we go. So last year there was an incident where salvage divers were in the South China Sea salvaging wrecks, World War II shipwrecks for steel, for brass, for aluminium. The reason for that is that all of those metals were forged before this man exploded a giant bomb with a Trinity test, throwing a bunch of radioactive material into the air. What does this have to do with generative AI? That's a very good question. This is really, really important for the data that you use to train your models. Now, is anyone here on LinkedIn? Of course you are. You're at Big Data London, aren't you? You've seen the new opting in policy for generative AI training on LinkedIn, yeah? So if you don't know, LinkedIn have rolled out a feature where all of your posts will be opted in automatically to train its large language models. You know, we're not making any value judgments here, but what's going to be really, really interesting is how that's going to perform, given a lot of the content now, I'm not going to be uncharitable, is generated with the assistance of OpenAI and other large language models. Now this is super, super important because you start thinking about things like model collapse, biases, all of those sorts of good things, bad things, and you know, you'll be seeing how those large language models might deteriorate in their performance over time, even allowing for that kind of model advancement and so on. So keep that in the back of your mind as we go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's really important to focus on the data being used as that input. Good input leads to a good output. And so some of the problems you may encounter if you do not focus on data. Firstly, inaccuracies. You often see those as hallucinations. And if the training data contains ambiguous or contradictory data, that's going to reflect itself in the output. Data may be incomplete. So are you using all the data available within your enterprise? What's stopping you from using that data? Often companies have an extensive amount of data available to them, both internally and external feeds that they are purchasing and procuring, but the volume, velocity, and variety of that data prevents them from using that as an input. Think about the biases that may be implied in the data you are feeding into your models. One client we've worked with recently made the decision to only take HR data from 2004 onwards. The reason they decided to take that cutoff point is the data they had collected over many years had been biased towards white males in executive positions. And for their predictive analytics and job recommendations, they wanted to make sure the output was reflective of the working population today.
I was going to add something to that, Ravi, as well. So we see in a lot of our financial services clients them looking very, very hard at their credit scoring and their underwriting data, stretching back over time in their risk models for the similar reasons that Ravi's pointed out just now. You know, before 1985, how many women were approved for mortgages on their own, for example, single-parent families, all of those sorts of things. There's an excellent book that details this, Weapons of Math Destruction. If you haven't read it already, I would recommend that heartily for an in-depth conversation about that.
And so you may think, okay, let's just throw everything in. That's one option. Trouble is, there's a lot of duplicated, replicated data across your system. Throughout this conference, the last 2 days, we've spoken to loads of people coming to our booth and saying, well, yeah, we've got a problem with data in silos. It's not linked, but they all represent the same person, the same company, the same location. So, of course, if you're going to throw all that data in individually without it being linked together and cleaned, you're going to incur large costs just processing duplicate data. And then think about the compliance of the data that's coming out. Who owns the data that you're putting in? And do you have permission to use it in a model? As Markus mentioned, think about LinkedIn and how now they're amassing all that training data that's available for use. So look at your sources, make sure that you have that permission to use that, because then if you don't, you may run into problems where the output may have claimed ownership by other people as well. Yeah.
So I was going to say, just jump in here, the whole thing here is about intentionality. A lot of our clients, their AI strategy could be summarized as, well, chatbots are better than people, or do you want to build on Snowflake? And those sort of technology-led approaches, you know, may be able to start the conversation, but you'll soon probably find yourselves lost in a wood of technical debt. And those approaches you'll have to just let go, ultimately, before you start thinking more holistically about the data and the approach that you want to use.
And so how do we do this with that intent? First step, sounds obvious, but improve that data quality. And so be very clear and purposeful about the definition of the data that you're using, especially when it comes to synthetic data. Make sure it's representative of the outcome that you're looking to achieve. And to the point earlier about steel, make sure if you're using synthetic data, that is uncontaminated as much as possible. And of course, then from there, we said, yeah, let's take as much data as we can across your enterprise and throw that in. That's going to increase the volume, variety, and of course the velocity. The downside of that, of course, is that's going to put an emphasis and more dependencies on that first point. The more you throw in, the more you want to make sure it's improved and is of high quality itself.
I just want to pick up on something here as well. We're not looking for perfection with all of this, picking up on the excellent panel discussion before. It's got to be good enough. It's got to be good enough. It's got to be representative. It's got to be trustworthy enough. You know, perfection is an endless sort of quest, right? But yeah, this is the key thing. It's got to be good enough for what you want to be doing, you know, to be able to get confidence in the outcomes that you're looking for.
Jump the gun here a bit, but increase the amount of structured data you can put into those models. So in this way, you've got lots of internal data, structured, semi-structured. Let's put some rigidity about that so that you know exactly which fields have the right data that you want to put in as features to those models themselves. That really will amplify the efficacy of that system. And then finally, to the last point around making sure you're using data you have permission for and is for the right content, add metadata and documentation to each of your sources. Let's understand exactly what part of the ocean that steel came from and what purpose it can be used for. This is where the focus on metadata and documentation with the intent of consumption is super important. Many customers I've spoken to in the past have embarked on these tremendous projects to build metadata catalogs, but now I think there's a fantastic opportunity to augment those catalogs with the consumption points in mind.
I was going to say, and the thing is that at Thoughtworks, we've got some great tools that can help you do all of that metadata documentation, discovery, and publication that sit quite comfortably along leading edge tools like Tamr, for example. I mean, metadata should always support the thing that you're doing. Doing it for itself is a very worthy and worthwhile exercise, but it's always value. How are you moving the company forward? How are you moving things forward?
And so what does this actually look like in practice? And I'm going to tell you a little bit of story about a case study we've done, and think about the theme of I see dead people, a film, The Sixth Sense. I think one of the interesting things I learned about Sixth Sense is in the film, whenever the real world is merged with the afterlife world, sorry to give any spoilers there is a color red that you'll see on screen. And so think about that in the context of AI data being mixed, synthetic data from AI systems being mixed with real world data. Key point here is we're going to talk a little story about seeing dead people. And this story begins with a customer of ours, Old Mutual. Old Mutual sell insurance and loans and financial products in South Africa. They came to Tamr with a traditional legacy MDM decommissioning project. They had an existing system, it worked, they wanted to modernize it as part of their digital transformation. So we went through, we applied Tamr's solution, building out views of individuals, households and advisors, accelerating the process on that and improving the quality of that data. The key benefit for them was the ability to go through cross-sell and upsell to their customers and really improve the customer service cycle. So all in all, a good fit for Tamr, good traditional use case. But where do the dead people come into it? Well, Old Mutual sell those life insurance policies. And one of the registries that they have to indicate whether someone needs to be paid out on a policy or not is in South Africa, they have the Department of Homeland Affairs database, a list of dead people. And so this was an external source they really wanted to utilize. Now, of course, if you're paying out on a policy, you want to make sure somebody's actually dead or not. So you have this list, and short of going to the morgue and checking out to see if someone's there on the tag, this is an authoritative list that they can use to consult and make those payments in a timely manner, but also to stop collecting premiums from those people. From personal experience, I found it very traumatic when premiums are paid for those who have been deceased. We really want to avoid that from happening. So Tamr was able to take that list of dead people that's been constantly updated, marry it up against their existing customer list, and be able to confidently say, yep, here are the policies that you need to go through and process and run. And in addition to that, there's another external source, an authoritative source of identity details in South Africa called Who You. This has an ID for someone, it has a set of verified contact details, and so we use that as another source. And the really interesting thing for this particular source is that there were data quality errors and duplicates within that source itself. So you couldn't just go and onboard it, you had to clean that up. And that's really testament to a point earlier about improving data quality for each source before you put it up into a model, an engine, and integrate it with other systems.
So I was just going to add to this. So this sounds like a spiel for a product. Yeah, it's great, it has a brilliant use case. But this brings us to the next point of this conversation, where AI and ML and these cutting edge tools are absolutely critical, for the next generation of data management, data governance practices, data quality, et cetera, et cetera. If you have a situation where you have a bunch of IDs, say, Val John J, in Bastille, Dan Smith in Bastille, you're going to look at that and you're going to go, well, is this the same person or not? Maybe, maybe not. Probably isn't. But the old deterministic ways of matching these sorts of things, it would create probably an error, and then you'd be manually recognizing that. A tool like Tamr, with a human plugged into it, will be able to cut through that like a hot knife through butter. And it's for that next generation of data management tools, we were thinking about internet scale, enterprise scale. That kind of assistance is absolutely critical. Ravi.
There you go. We got our data mesh reference in there. Thank you, Markus.
That's all right.
And so the good news for you all is that many of these techniques and methodologies are things you're working on today, whether it's reference data, metadata management, or data quality, or even data governance. The key point we want to stress is you're not starting from scratch. Augment what you've already got in place. Use that as a starting block to accelerate the creation of these processes and emphasis on new systems.
Yeah, it absolutely isn't a journey into the unknown at all.
And so one of the interesting ways to look at this is really around master data management in general. As we talk to different customers, there's lots of different ways in which folks will go and implement master data management, whether it's a simple registry all the way through to a central MDM system. Key point here is that regardless of how you're setting up your MDM implementation, AI benefits you. in that entity resolution and the ability to link those records together, both internally and externally, like Old Mutual did.
I was going to say, my colleague Danilo, who's speaking in another theatre at the moment, this is something that's very, very near and dear to his heart around how MDM is not just a practice and data governance tool. It's actually part of a slightly more hybrid thinking of data mesh and data products, where these things sit not just within the analytical space, suggested maybe by the registry, but also can sit in an operational space as well. And ML, particularly for large data sets and in any sort of enterprise where you've, been created through multiple acquisitions, multiple CRMs, multiple fund accounting systems, all of those things, all of those duplicates, single view of the customer, all these use cases that are near and dear to our hearts. Scale is always a challenge, volume's always a challenge, and AI and ML with a tool like Tamr will help you grasp that challenge, grasp that nettle.
Yeah, and I think another key point just to emphasize is that we often see people starting with one style of MDM and moving forward to another. Often starting, let's say, with an analytic question, how many customers do I have, all the way through to a central MDM system where you've got lots of information coming in and needs to be reconciled in real time. So regardless of where you are on the journey, you can switch styles. It's not a decision that's set in stone. It's just something to bear in mind as you look to adopt these solutions. And so how does MDM benefit from AI? And really, the problem we see with MDM is scale. So let's go for a simple example here. Let's say you have 525,600 records. They could be customers, locations, suppliers, whatsoever. And you want to say, are these representative of the same person, individual, or entity? Now, to compare them, if you compare every record against every other record, that's 138 billion different comparisons. Now, clearly you're not going to do that because you wouldn't compare Ravi Hulasi in Boston, Massachusetts, Markus Buhmann in Kent. So let's narrow that down a bit to say 100 comparisons. And even doing that, taking 2 seconds to do each comparison, having someone do that, give it a thumbs up, a thumbs down, that'll take about 14 years to do. And if you look at an average wage for that, it's about $900,000 to do that. And that's just once. Data's always changing, data's in flux, people are updating their account details, mergers and acquisitions. This data scale is always growing. And so trying to solve it in a manual manner doesn't really work, and that's where AI can help.
I was going to say, and yes, we are teaching you all to suck eggs a little bit here, but it's really, really important to emphasize that, the sort of the new AI and ML-based approaches, again, with a human plugged into the process, it's not just matchmaker. Do you know what I mean? It is about just being able to process stuff at enormous scale very quickly with that expertise, with business stakeholders plugged in. And the big benefit here is that if you're involving those people in the business, they'll start to understand the value of their data, how important good quality data is, and they'll be able to see the results to start to drive those insights going forward.
Exactly, and so really AI just allows us to hack that problem, doing things efficiently, reliably, and at lower cost, because rather than having individuals, maybe offshored or elsewhere, running through those comparisons with lots of inconsistencies, you've got a system that will go through and be reliable, can be trained to be reliable and improve the quality of the data automatically over time.
Next one.
And so we spoke about how we can use AI to hack the scale problem. Also 2 really good examples of how you can increase your efficacy of your data as well as improve the coverage of it. First example is reducing noise. You've got lots of streams of data coming in, dirty data, as well as incorrect data coming through. One example where this works really well today, spam filters. Think about the deluge of emails that you've got coming in. You've got an AI system that's looking at each one, filtering out all the bad stuff, goes into the spam folder, all the good stuff goes into your inbox or your priority inbox.
Yeah, and we see these use cases time and time again. Some of the more, in the banks we see some of the more algorithmic trading, sentiment analysis and social media is part of those data sets. Again, which you're dealing with a lot of information that needs to be dealt with very, very quickly. And again, just to give a sense of how those sentiments are playing in the marketplace in volatile sorts of markets.
And also a key point, sometimes you get false positives with spam. So you can go into your spam folder, you can apply feedback, and that's really important. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The second example is document warehouse. So many companies have gone through that pain of taking those bankers' boxes of data, scanning them, digitizing them, putting them into PDFs. But unfortunately, that's where a lot of people have stopped. You've got a PDF, you have no idea, other than a few tags, what's available within there. We're seeing the need for companies to use that data to its full potential, whether that's looking at insurance claims and the line of items for the items that have been billed, or even looking at engineering parts diagrams and specs for engines, motors, compressors, you name it. So all that data is available within those PDFs, and now there's a lot of fantastic technologies out there, things like Google Document Warehouse, Unstructured I/O. Those can take those PDFs and extract all that rich information out. Then there's features to use within your AI models or any other master solution.
And and that sounds very grand, but there are some real, just ridiculous problems that we see. And at a bank that I used to work at, one of the things we found was that there was a preponderance of ISDA contracts settled in Albanian leks, and preponderance of people in their KYC information who were either actuaries or astronauts. I'll leave that to you to figure out, how they got to that sort of situation. But being able to, filter that out is super, super helpful.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about feedback, and I'll give an example from the consumer space. On the left-hand side, you have a film studio releases a motion picture. They get feedback after the event. People either interviewing people walking out of the cinema, or indeed reviews or even box office numbers. Let's compare that to Netflix. Netflix has a direct connection to the consumer. Key point here is you can go onto Netflix, you start watching something. If you don't, at the end of it, they ask you, did you like it or not? Thumbs up, thumbs down. It's great feedback post the event. The key point is though, is that Netflix, because it has that direct connection to the point of consumption, they can tell, well, did people pause it? Did people go back to the homepage and look for another show or program to watch? So the key point here is tightening that feedback loop, embracing it at the point of consumption, gives you valuable information far quicker that you can then use, in Netflix's case, to offer up new content that you may want to watch.
So I want to add something here, and this is really, really interesting. So this is where, sort of the use of AI and your is really, really, intentionality is really, really key. So before 2018, Netflix offered a five-point scale, 1 to 5, and you would rate your score. Now, a movie would come along like Napoleon Dynamite. Everyone familiar with that? Yep. You either get it or you don't. It's either a 5 or a 1, and there's a number of those films which completely broke their recommendation engine, which meant that they abandoned it and moved to something. Is it good? Do you like it or do you not like it? For making recommendations that were personal to you rather than to everybody else. So it's really, really important that sort of AI is not just this thing that will go like, it will solve it all. There needs to be a really considered approach to your features, your models, and how and where that use case is. Is it for everyone or is it for you? Really, really important.
And so let's compare that to what things look like in the enterprise. Unfortunately, you end up with this sort of dialogue here, where you've got data being consumed, feedback, maybe problems in the data take a very long time to get resolved. Either that's reporting the actual problem or indeed resolving it. So key point here, the advice is embrace that feedback loop, encourage it at the point of consumption. So how do we get there? Well, nothing happens in the vacuum here. Let's talk about a few key points how to go forward.
I mean, I think the thing is that picking up on a point from the panel previously, it's really important, to literally be in the room where it happens, where people make those decisions, right? AI is a tremendous opportunity for any organization, any business, but, it's one of those things that you need to consider carefully. You need to consider how you're going to apply it, your use cases and so on. It's focusing on those people that matter. There's a real opportunity now for the data teams, to take their shot and get this right. I mean, you just can't sit there and wait. It's right there for the taking, and it's about it's about building those relationships and showing that value in small incremental changes. You'll hear that over and over again, but that's one thing that you must focus on. Doing something because it's a good idea, and I'm not looking at metadata management in particular or picking on that, but it needs to be in service of something else, and it needs to tie to something else. It needs to be real. And that's the key thing.
So a couple of key takeaways as we start to wrap up. Firstly, enterprise data is a scale problem. AI helps you solve that scale problem. Governance at the source sounds great. It's a road to nowhere. Really focus your governance at it with consumption in mind.
It's putting yourself in the position of the users, the people that are using it. This is where the data conversation is not just a technical conversation. And a lot of places are at the start of their maturity journey. It is that technical conversation. That needs to be that focus on the people who are ultimately getting the insights or consuming that data.
In terms of tackling your data, there's a lot of data out there. Tackle it in thin slices. Look at your internal data, look at your structured data, look at your external data, unstructured data. Lots to consider, lots of different approaches to pulling that data in, but they're all worthy of focus.
So this is something that we talk a lot about at Thoughtworks, these sensible defaults, and thin slices is one of those. So you take a very, very narrow use case and see it all the way through. And this applies in all aspects of data management, software development, all of those sorts of things, because then you can flush out all of the risks and challenges early, and you're not going to be surprised as you move through the life cycle of value chain of the the use case that you're working on.
And finally, we spoke about feedback. Data gets better with feedback. Embrace that feedback at a point of consumption as much as possible and as soon as possible. So with that, I wanted to give a quick example of what improving data quality could mean for a chief data officer of the future. And I want to talk about two different things. What it looks like at the entity level, and then what it looks like at the enterprise level. And apologies if the slides are a little bit hard to read. We've got these demos at our booth. We can walk through those there. But at the entity level, we've mastered and built a golden record. That's what Tamr does fantastically well. In this example here, golden record for a particular company. We've gone in, we've linked it across different sources, and we've linked it against external data as well. Now, doing this at scale means that there's going to be tens, hundreds, thousands of attributes applied to that golden record, and getting a clear and consistent summary of that is something that a Gen AI model can do really well. You can feed in all those different attributes and ask questions. So, simple question that you could ask is, who is the parent company? How do you know? And so here in this example, we've got Tallies Australia, and we've got a response here by using external reference data that Tamr matched together to say who the parent company is and what source it comes from. I think a key point here in terms of ensuring trust and confidence in Gen AI models is that the sources for these answers are highlighted in bold. It's a key nuance just so that you get confidence where is this something that the data has been assembled from known and trusted sources, or is it something that is maybe just part of a standard large language model? So as you grow the use of data within your enterprise, the number of bold items will grow as well. And that gives people additional confidence to all ensure they're reading the same data, singing from the same hymn sheet.
So transparency, provenance, all of that good stuff. And there's something really, really important here as well, for AI, for data management and AI, is that you manage your own data. You can see here that it's data being brought in from outside the organization, to accelerate that.
And so now we scale this up again. Let's look at multiple entities, multiple domains of data. Now you can start to ask questions across each of those mastered domains. It could be a simple question such as, what's my exposure to companies in Texas? That was a question we were asked recently by a customer who has, there's recently Hurricane Beryl in Texas. They wanted to know, well, how does this affect my business? It affects it in terms of my customers, my own locations, the parts and supply chain that go through Texas. So being able to put a large language model across multiple domains of master clean data allows them to answer that question in an ad hoc manner rather than having to wait for someone to go and build a dashboard. And again, the key bold fields allows them to have that confidence in the data and the answers being given. And so with that, we'd like to thank you for your time today. We've got a couple of good articles here, a few QR codes to scan if you want to take some further reading just about the possibilities of improving your data and how you can modernize your MDM using AI and what things can look like for a chief data officer. And if you want to come over and have a chat with us, we are going to be in booth Y714 over that way. Thank you, and wish you all the best on your AI journey.
Thank you very much.